So, yeah, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting. Again, we're all at home, isolated, and in a virtual meeting room. So I think we've got very used to this now. So usual rules apply. Please mute when you're not speaking. I will try to make sure that I give you sort of prior warning when the next speaker, what the list of speakers looks like. So it gives you a bit of chance to be a bit more efficient in getting into the room, or getting to speak, should I say. We've got a manageable, we've got a small agenda tonight, which we want to go through. So I don't really want to plan a break, but I will do so if later on. And we've got some public speakers, which I took at discretion. Being a special meeting, I don't necessarily have to take them, but I have taken them to speak this evening. So, Joe, I think, and just try to add, it's the usual arrangements. May I speak in the chat, please, and voting arrangements. And Lisa will blow a whistle for the speakers after 2 minutes, give you 1 minute warning, and then 3 minutes when your time is up. So, Joe, can you do a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Rob Appleyard.
Here.
Tim Ball.
Here.
Sarah Bevan.
Present.
Colin Blackburn.
Present.
Alison Bourne.
Here.
Shelley Bromley.
Present.
Neil Butters.
Present.
Vic Clark.
Present.
Sue Craig.
Here.
Paul Crossley.
Present.
Jerry Curran.
Present.
Chris Dando.
Present.
Jess David.
Present.
Tom Davis.
Present.
Sally Davis.
Present.
Doug Deacon.
Present.
Thank you. Winston Dogood.
Present.
Mark Elliott.
Present.
Michael Evans.
Present.
Andy Furs.
Present.
Kevin Guy.
Present.
Alan Hale.
Present.
Liz Hardman. Come back. Steve Hedges.
Present.
Joel Hurst.
Good evening.
Lucy Hodge.
Present.
Duncan Hounsell.
Present.
Sean Hughes.
Present.
Eleanor Jackson.
Present.
Grant Johnson.
My pleasure to be here.
Dr. Kumar.
Happy New Year.
Hal McPhee.
Present.
Ruth Malloy.
Hello, present.
Paul May.
Present.
Matt McCabe.
Present.
Sarah Moore.
Present.
Robin Moss.
Evening all.
Paul Myers.
Present.
Lisa O'Brien.
Present.
Michelle O'Doherty.
Present.
Barrett Pancania.
Present.
June Player.
Present.
Vic Pritchard.
Present.
Randa Rigby.
Present.
Tina Romero.
Present.
Mark Roper.
Present.
Richard Samuel.
Present.
Bruce Shern.
Present.
Brian Simmons.
Present.
Alistair Singleton.
Present.
Sean Stevenson McGall.
Present.
Andy Waite.
Present.
Karen Walker.
Yep, I'm here.
Sarah Warren.
Present.
Karen Warrington.
Present.
Chris Watt. Ryan Wills.
Present.
David Wood.
Present.
Joanna Wright.
Present.
Thank you. And Liz Hardman, I didn't have a present. Liz,
Yes, apologies. I couldn't find the unmute button, but I am here.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
And any apologies? I noticed that Chris Watt didn't respond.
Watt, I think at the moment has not responded. Yeah.
And that's all of us, is that otherwise?
Yes.
Great. Great, thank you everyone. And declarations of interest, Joe, please.
Yes, I've had, in relation to agenda item 7, councillors Liz Hardman and Ruth Malloy, on the food, they're both on the food poverty steering group. So although it's not a pecuniary or another interest under the code, just for the sake of transparency, they have declared an interest on that item. And that's all I've had notified, so I wonder if there's any more.
Chair, should I declare an interest as coordinator for Keynsham Food Bank?
It's worth noting, Alan, I think, yeah, thank you. It's obviously not pecuniary, but it aids transparency, as Joe said. I think it's only right to do it. Thank you.
Thank
you. Okay, if anyone realises they've got an interest as we go through the debate, please make that clear, either in the chat or to Joe and I, and we'll pick that up as we go through. So thank you, everyone. So next item on the agenda is, and I've just lost my page. Right, so announcements from the chair, item 3. So I mentioned about the break, so that's where we are. We will have a break if we need to, but I won't plan it because I think we might get through the evening without one. Also, I'd like to just make a statement really to the, I've been informed of, I'm sad to report the death of Tony Crouch back in December, who was a Keynsham Town Councillor. Tony had been a Keynsham Town Councillor for 21 years and a long-time member of our Standards Committee. Keynsham Town Councillor is also in his tributes and describes Tony as a gentle giant of a man with his interests firmly rooted in the church, the community and the people of Keynsham. I and Bath and North East Somerset wish to extend our sincere condolences to his wife, family and friends. Can I ask then that we have a 1 minute silence, please, in memory of Tony? Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that. I'd like to now invite the Leader of the Council to make a statement recognising and appreciating the staff contribution during the pandemic. So, Dina, I think you've got a statement on behalf of all group leaders, I understand.
I have, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to make a statement on behalf of all group leaders and so all councillors, and this is to all of our council's staff. I want to say thank you to everyone who works for the council and who has worked so tirelessly and selflessly through the duration of this pandemic. This thank you, as I said, is to everyone who works for the council, for those in frontline services to those working behind the scenes. It is for everyone who empties our bins and deals with recycling, to those who are helping with housing, social care and working in the community, those that are processing business grants, and to those who have been redeployed, perhaps from working at the Roman Baths to work at the Hub, to registrars at the Guildhall and to those in our bereavement services, and also to everyone in democratic services and our technical team, without whom no one would be able to take part or watch council meetings. This, in short, is a thank you to everyone at Bath and North East Somerset Council. It is your work that in normal times provides the support and services that are for our residents, and we are immensely grateful that you have gone above and beyond your normal exemplary level during this long, relentless pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. And as I'll just reiterate, that's on behalf of all group leaders, so appreciate that, and I'm sure that has our full support and thanks. And there's a couple of people indicating on the screen now, so no, thank you for that, Dina. Moving on, I'd like to invite the leader of the council again, if I may, to give a brief statement as to where we are with the COVID situation in Bath and North East Somerset, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors. As has become my practice, I would like to take a few minutes to give you a very brief update on the COVID situation in Bath and North East Somerset. Our case numbers are reducing and currently stand at 380 from nearly 500 last week. The latest variant is more transmissible, so fewer cases show that as a council area, we are by and large doing the right thing and following the rules. However, 380 per 100,000 population is still a lot and is still putting pressure on our health services. So despite the hope that we get from the vaccination programme and the local contact tracing that has recently been started, we must remain vigilant and still stay at home wherever possible. One concern that this council has, and our partners and residents have, is on mental well-being, and I would hope you will help signpost anyone who may need help to our community and wellbeing hub. The hub has taken nearly 11,000 calls since its inception and continues to triage those in need with a variety of support, including delivering emergency food and medications, as well as access to mental health support, the CAB, and a wide range of services. This remains an awful time for many, and we must continue to do what we can to help each other. If there's one good thing that has come out of this pandemic, it is a greater sense of community. I would like to take this opportunity to also thank all our partners and all the volunteer groups for all of their support and help to us and for residents throughout the pandemic. And lastly, I would like to say thank you, councillors, for everything you're doing to help our residents. Thank you.
That's appreciated, Dina. Thank you very much. Any comments arising from that, please pass back to Dina directly. I'm sure she'll respond appropriately to those comments. Next item on the agenda, moving on, item 4, any urgent items from the chairman? I've got none to report, so we'll move on. Item 5, I have 4 registered public statements. As I already mentioned, yes, it is a special meeting and we wouldn't always normally have public speakers, but I've used my discretion to do so. A number of them are directly related to agenda items. So let's go first. I've got Luke John Emmett first. I didn't see Luke on the screen. Is he there?
I think he's just being admitted, actually, Chair. So
I'm happy to move on to David Redgewell, and then we'll get Luke to come in a minute. Otherwise, we'll spring it on him, and it's difficult enough doing all of this. So, David, are you there?
Yep. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, please go ahead, David.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think obviously climate change is very important, and obviously public transport fits in conveniently with that. Because obviously, if you want to improve air quality, improve the climate emergency, you need to have a good public transport system in Bath and North East Somerset and in the West Riding Combined Authority area. So I suppose the one thing I'm obviously very concerned about is to make sure that, as WECA now does not yet have preset powers, and they should have like every other transport authority, it means passporting money from the Baines Council, South Gloucester and Bristol, to WECA to run the bus services, continued support services like the ones in Keynsham, Radstock, Midsummer Norton, evening services and some Sunday services. So I just want to press that point. It's very important that precepting continues to be passed across to WECA for public bus services. I think the other thing I want to say is I'm pleased with the WECA team. We've had to reduce the bus services yet again last week, but from Sunday we get a more reduced service across the sub-region. And again, they've worked very hard to maintain hospital links, vital links to vaccination centres and vital links, working with First Stagecoach and HCT. I will raise one thing for Neil, please, to pick up again. I'm very concerned about HCT drivers that live in Bath, but work in Bristol. HCT is a bus company from London that runs Keynsham Town Service. They still have no screen to protect them from COVID-19 viruses. And hopefully that can be, again, looked at by Director of Public Health in Bristol and in Bay. I know you've done a lot of good work on it, but we haven't yet got there, Neil. I'm thankful for the work you've tried. So on rail, of course, we've got reduced service there, but again, that is very, very important. I regret the loss of catering services on the London Waterloo services. I don't know if that's permanent or temporarily. And I think the other thing is the WECA Mayor has now gone out to consultation on the light rail project, mass transit project. And I think we'd like to see some meetings around that in the Bath area, Keynsham and in the area to look at the proposals and discussions. They promised that, but yet to see a programme, and that could be by Zoom, doesn't have to be, of course, it can't be in public. So I think there's progress being made. I also was very pleased to see that Marvin Rees sat in for 3 hours on a special scrutiny commission in Bristol to look at North Somerset joining WECA. And we seem to find out from Tim Borrett, and I mentioned the legal officer's name because your officers might want to check as well, that we believe North Somerset can join in between elections if invited by the 4 councils and the mayor. So I would ask Dina to look at that and look at governance and scrutiny and bring that back again through WECA scrutiny. I think we're making progress because Marvin is seeming to find a way forward, provided we can get a devolution deal, and that should be around light rail, should be around Temple Meads, and should be around precepting and better bus services in the sub-region as a whole. So as a whole, at the moment, again, slightly adjusted because of the COVID-19 situation, which is a moving feast on transport. But I want to pay tribute to all the work that's going on, especially now WECA runs public transport with the officers of Bath and North East Somerset and Neil and Joanna for trying to keep on top of this. I'm very grateful. But remember, the big picture, climate change, we cannot do without public bus services, public rail services, and hopefully in the future, light rail services in Bath and North East Somerset. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that. Now, group leaders, I'll ask group leaders factual questions, please. So go around the room. Dina, Councillor Romero.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to defer to Councillor Butters, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dave, for your usual very assiduous work on public transport front. If you care to send me an email about the screen issue, I'd be happy to pursue that. Mass transit is indeed coming to the fore. We don't know quite what form it will take, but there's a lot going on there, so keep tuned in on that one. Were you aware that the 3rd tranche of the Restoring Your Railway Fund is about to open, and there's a strong bid from WECA for the reopening of Salford Station, at least, should shortly be ready for submission?
I would fully support that, and I hope we can get the support of Jacob Rees-Mogg, the MP, as well as the WECA Mayor, to make sure that goes forward. Certainly it should go forward along with St Anne's in Bristol. Makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Councillor Myers, please.
Thank you. Looking at your written statement, which I was listening out for to catch whether you actually did cover, could you please clarify your statement regarding your concerns with regard to bollard designed and disabled people and partially sighted people in Bath city centre?
Yes, the consultation has been out and is about disclosed, but we were concerned about designs. It's very difficult at the moment, Councillor, to go out physically with the officers, which I've done in the past, in and around Bath and North East Somerset, to look at these designs and look at the actual on the ground stuff. But I am concerned again about partially sighted people, design of the bollards, and actually making sure there's adequate provision for wheelchair users to get around the new street patterns, and that the bollards aren't put in a way in such a way it makes it more difficult for mobility impaired blind people and disabled. Perhaps a Zoom call could be arranged, because the usual kind of excellent work that goes on with your transport department is very difficult to do on the ground at the moment.
Thank you, David. And I've got Councillor Walker. Question, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, for your statement. I actually believe that Councillor Myers has actually just asked the question that I was going to put to you, but thank you very much.
Very happy to help, Councillor. Very happy to help on that issue and trying to sort that out to make sure it's safe for disabled people.
Great, Karen, thank you. And Councillor Moss, please.
No factual questions, but thanks for the statement, David.
Okay, excellent. We move on to the next speaker. So I'm informed that Luke is now in the room. Luke, are you there?
Yes.
Are you okay to talk now?
Yeah,
give your speech time. The floor's yours. Off you go.
Lovely. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm here to raise concerns about the lack of arts and cultural representation in the Baines One Shared Vision consultation and the stories included therein. Ever since the decimation of the Arts Development Department and scathing cuts by the previous administration, arts and culture in Bath has lacked a unified voice within the city. We have a creative and cultural strategy which is sat on a shelf somewhere gathering dust, yet when we apply for funding, we're told that we should be referencing it. The city needs a collective vision for the arts, and whereas I was never a fan of the narrow vision of this document, the city does need an updated and future-looking cultural and creative strategy which reflects the city today. Throughout lockdown, artists from all art forms have kept people entertained with live streams of music, theatre, comedy, poetry, storytelling, dance, the list is endless. Artists have done this, although many of them have fallen through the government's emergency funding gaps. We watched as overnight our careers were ripped away and we were told to retrain to get proper jobs. Now, I don't need to prove the economic benefits of the arts. The point has been proven time and time again. But if Bath's arts and cultural scene thrives, so do the many businesses that surround them, and the nighttime offer to tourists is greatly enhanced. How many people's mental health has benefited from exposure to the arts during lockdown? The benefits of arts and culture on people's health and well-being is well documented and widely known. In Bath, we're very good at looking at the past, at our heritage, but what is often ignored is the part that arts and culture played in our history, from performances in the Roman theatre, which is believed to be somewhere underneath the Mineral Water Hospital, to the mystery and morality plays that were performed at St. Michael's Without, the travelling players that visited here, including Shakespeare's company, although perhaps not Shakespeare himself, to the many different theatres and performance venues that thrived in the time of Beau Nash, the famous bands that toured here to the 60s and 70s, to the many street performers and buskers, all the amateur theatre companies, comedians, musicians, poets, storytellers, and dancers who live and work here today, and then all of our brilliant festivals and events. So why, in a post-COVID vision of Bath, is there no mention of arts and culture? You've declared a climate emergency. Well, I'm declaring an arts and cultural emergency. Arts and culture should be at the heart of any vision of the city going forwards. A vision of Bath that ignores all this is a vision of the city which is a shadow of its former self, a city without a heart. Now, I know that you can't help the arts financially, but going forwards, I urge you to include them in economic regeneration plans for the city. Arts and culture's value cannot be defined only in monetary terms, but for the enrichment of life it brings to thousands of residents and cultural tourists each year. Thank you very much for letting me join, and I will happily take any questions you may have now.
Thank you, Luke. That's very well put. So I've got a group leader, so Councillor Romero, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Luke, for your very helpful statement. Would you be willing to meet with myself and Councillor Crossley to explore the points that you make and find out how we can progress this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to.
Obviously, when I say meet, I mean virtually.
Thank you. Councillor Myers, please.
No factual questions.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Walker, please.
Thank you, Luke, for your statement, but no factual questions.
Thank you, Karen. And Councillor Moss, please.
Yes, thank you, Luke, for raising a number of issues and alerting us to some potential problems. No factual questions, but again, thanks for the statement.
Thank you, Robin. So next speaker on my list is Martin Grixoni. I saw you in the room. Are you ready, Martin?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much. So I'm here this evening to talk about 5G and the further rollout of which will hopefully turn Bath into an attractive location for business and living. But to quote the press, what the hell is going on in Bath? And the following is a recent example of this, sadly only one of an increasing number of what are, by my estimation, inept and naive decisions by this administration. So there was a recent planning committee meeting that had an application to change the 4G mast on Charkham Lane in Larkhall to 5G. But despite national approval of 5G plus planning permission, a UK-wide rollout, no objection on ecological grounds, and the parish council in question voting for it, it was voted down. And here's why I think why. So some quotes from the meeting from Councillor Sarah Warren. She highlighted the duty of the committee to prevent harm. She stated that some research showed that 5G can have an adverse effect on health and that electromagnetic pollution could also cause environmental harm. And to quote her, all the 343 residents who have objected are asking for is not to be used as guinea pigs in a global experiment. Councillor Gevin Guy felt that a radiation exclusion zone was required, which is not the case. And as close to a nursery school and community hall, therefore it will be irresponsible to approve. Councillor Joanna Wright had previously stated about concerns on the effect on wildlife, and Councillor McPhee stated he would prefer the mast to be located further away from populated areas. I'm not quite sure where, but that was that. So on the vote down itself, there was quotes from One saying 315 don't want it. There had been over 300 objections, which is about a third of 1% of the Bath population, and therefore it should not go ahead. And another person said that health matters are a material consideration, which they're not. The consequences of that were that the press got hold of it. It started off with Guido Fawkes' parliamentary gossip website, which stated that the Bath MP Weir Hobhouse is now fanning the flames of the tinfoil hat brigade and desperate to find a new conspiracy cause to lose the plot over. And they did include a nice picture of her with a tinfoil hat on. The Guardian then picked it up on the 26th of December, and then the Observer. Bath Lib Dems hook up with 5G dupes and cranks and are complying with their wishes, endorsing raging fantasies about 5G phone masts, and he accused them of cowardice when no one is punished for biting their tongues when they should speak out. And of Weir Hobhouse's concern for the residents, he said that was cowardice passed off as open-mindedness, so much so that your brain falls out. The Lib Dem Voice, which is your own sort of publication, said that that was naturally proper research was not done. But Private Eye then picked that up and stated last week in her rebuttal of the Guardian article, Dina Romero had assured there was no mention at all of health concerns. Private Eye felt she had been rather economical with the actuality, with the YouTube of the planning meeting showing otherwise. And when informed any appeal would fight against them, they were told they would need to cite other reasons, which they
Thank you, Martin.
Them. So
Thank you.
One thing.
Thank you. I think you made your point there, Martin. Thank you very much. So, sorry to cut you off, but yeah, you made your point. So I've got factual questions, and please make it factual questions. I don't want this turning into a planning debate. Factual questions from Councillor Romero, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to correct one thing before I hand over for the factual question. But the Planning Committee is not the administration. So I just wanted to correct that part of Martin Grixoni's statement before I hand over for a factual question to Councillor Ball.
So you're deferring to Councillor Ball. Tim, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Martin, thanks very much for your statement. Very interesting to hear from you. Were you aware, and I'm sure you are, there are already permissions for 5G masts in Bath, particularly at Twerton High Street, already installed? Royal United Hospital already installed, my understanding is, and also permitted developments in other areas throughout the city. So it's quite widely spread already.
Yes, I am aware of that, and you're right to point it out. At the same time, when things are voted down for the reasons given, despite the quotes from the meeting, and I do take your point, Councillor Romero, that it is planning is not the administration. However, it was the Liberal Democrat people on that planning committee that went on and on about health matters. So I'm just concerned overall that if they do that on health matters, but then change it to area of outstanding natural beauty matters and minute that instead, that sort of push against science by some of the councillors is just not clever in today's environment, especially when we've got a pandemic on.
Okay, Martin. Okay, I've got to move on to the next group leader, please. Councillor Myers, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. I wonder if you could please clarify, because you made a long list of this publicity, but I just wondered if you could clarify, given the adverse publicity, are you actually saying that you believe this matter's damaged the reputation of the city and the authority in terms of Bath being an attractive location for business?
Well, I am genuinely concerned by that. I mean, I've been in Bath since I've aged 4, and I want it to do well, whether it's under this administration or any other. And I'm concerned that we're being ridiculed in the national and indeed left-leaning press, and this has to be harmful to our reputation. So I'm hopeful that that the councillors concerned are just sort of got a grip of a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Walker, please.
Thank you, Martin, for your statement. I'm very interested to hear what your reply was to Councillor Myers, but I don't have a factual question for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And Councillor Moss, please.
Defer to Grant Johnson.
Grant.
Hi. Hi, Martin. At a time when the world is having to deal with the very real issue of anti-vaxxers when faced with a worldwide pandemic, do you believe that it is acceptable or even appropriate behaviour for anti-5G protesters to try and halt the progress and technological advances in the telecommunications industry based on the spread of misinformation from a small but loud group of paranoid and delusional cranks?
Well, Grant, you might imagine I do agree with you. I think the overall difficulty is that you've got some councillors, and indeed the MP, that are rather more a slave to that very loud but small minority, and they're therefore not representing the needs of a 21st century city. So I couldn't agree more, and I think you put it well.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on. Thank you very much, Martin. Appreciate that. Okay, so that's the end of that speaker. Next speaker is Mr. Bob Goodman. Good evening, Bob. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Over to you.
Right. It's good to be able to talk to Council on the climate ecological emergency. In this debate, no doubt the Cabinet member is going to praise what she has done to support the emergency, but how wrong is she? Within weeks of taking up office in 2019, the Cabinet member for Climate Emergency and Neighbourhood Services, Councillor Wood, dutifully signed an agreement to incinerate waste. Did he ask or even consider what damage this could do to the environment, as I did as cabinet in my cabinet row, refusing to approve the same contract for 6 months previous to it, because I was concerned that it would harm air quality, exacerbate climate change, and indeed reduce the amount of recycling. A few months later, planning was granted for 3 gas turbines in Midsummer Norton. So much for the carbon neutrality before 2030. This shameful decision was highlighted by Councillor Grant Johnson, and I want to thank him for everything he has done. Councillor Warren blamed everyone else, but we all knew that it was a lack of conviction which was the issue. After all, Bristol Council had refused a similar project only a few months before. Perhaps I should now come on to the most appalling act in the massacre of slowworms on Tuffa Fields. The in-house investigation was a complete whitewash. The council's own development company who were apparently responsible for the site, were never brought to task, even though Councillor Romero met the chair of ADL on site a few days later. Tuffa Fields, however, goes beyond that debacle. I wonder if you can guess who said these words, published on the Avon Wildlife Trust, and I quote, "What is needed now is determination to reverse the trend to decline what we have seen over the past few years and move towards habitat restoration." Well, it was Councillor David. And yes, she has failed at the very first hurdle, showing scant support for Tuffa Fields. Don't worry, Councillor David, you're not the only one who has put their political future beyond the ecological emergency. I am, of course, referring to Councillor Warren, who refused to say that this field must not be developed. If Greta Thunberg took that attitude, then we might as well all give up and leave our children's future to those who really do not care. Look at your children in the eye and tell them you are not going that extra mile for the environment. The one person who can stop this development is, of course, Councillor Romero. She needs to say, this is not going to develop. This council has clearly failed themselves. They have failed residents, but more than that, they have failed our children's future by the way they have approached the climate and ecological emergency. However, it's not too late. Start by declaring Tuffa Fields is safe from development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Councillor Romero, round of the group leaders, any factual questions, please? And I'll just remind all group leaders, factual questions, please. We don't want to get into a planning debate, please.
Thank you, Chair, for your reminder. I'd like to defer to Councillor Ball, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Goodman, do you not accept some responsibility, as you were the former cabinet member in charge of planning areas before this administration took over? And I refer to the 2017 placemaking plan and planning permissions actually put in for the Tuffa Field area whilst you were cabinet member.
Okay.
Can I kick that's the question. The question is, I accept that totally, but there was not an ecological emergency. There is now an ecological emergency, and that comes to the fore.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Myers, please.
Defer to Councillor Warrington.
Karen?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Bob. Is it easy to move a Toofer given that's in the proposal? But I understand that the field requires specific environmental conditions.
Well, Karen, actually, if we were talking about transferring mountain gorillas from Rwanda to somewhere else, everyone would be out would be totally against it. What we must look at is people who know what they're talking about. And Professor Mark Everard of West of England University has said it is a very difficult thing to do, just like very much some of the things on HS2, which again I very much oppose. I think we have to look at our ecology going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on. Thank you, Karen. Councillor Moss, please.
Hi, Bob. Impressed that anyone can combine a statement with HS2, mountain gorillas, slow worms, and Greta Thunberg.
Not bad.
But I will defer to Councillor Grant Johnson to ask a question.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Bob. Thank you for my kind mention in your original statement. Do you think that we have actually moved backward on the climate and ecological emergency under this administration?
Absolutely. I think they are praising themselves for this, that and the other without actually looking what is absolutely important. That is our children's future. And yes, I absolutely accept that Toofer Fields is a very, very small area, but we have to start there and we have to definitely send the message out there. We are not going to develop this.
Thank you, Bob. So, apologies, I missed Councillor Walker. Karen, would you like a factual question? I apologise for that.
I'll accept your apology. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Bob, for your statement. You've called upon Councillor Romero to stop the development of Tufferfield. So obviously planning permission has been granted and developer could just ignore the public outcry and the ecological emergency declaration and proceed with the development. So my question is, do you know if this site is still owned by Baines Council, or has the title been passed or sold or given to ADL or ACL?
Well, the first thing is planning permission has not quite yet been granted because the section 106 hasn't been signed. And this is my other point. Councillor Romero could say, stop the 106. She leads this council. She could say that. Going on to the next part, I don't actually know who owns this. I'm assuming because Councillor Romero said she's pausing development, that the council still own it. But what is of concern is that officers from ADL have actively been dealing with this site when, if they didn't own it, they should not have been doing it.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Appreciate your time this evening. So, to all the speakers, really appreciate your input this evening. Thank you very much. Now, you will be asked to leave the meeting now, and then you're able to rejoin through YouTube as normal. So, thank you again, and you can hear the rest of the meeting through YouTube. Thank you. Okay, councillors. So item 6, next item on the agenda, item 6. I'd like to invite Councillor Warren to present, please.
Good evening, councillors. I'm delighted to present the Climate and Ecological Emergency Progress Report to you. I ask you to note the wide-ranging underway towards our objective of net zero carbon emissions in Bath and North East Somerset by 2030, and also to note the initial update on the ecological emergency declared last July. Professor Paul Ehrlich and colleagues reminded us last week in an article in Frontiers in Conservation Science that we face a ghastly future of mass extinction, declining health, and climate disruption upheavals. They report that the scale of the threats to the biosphere and all its life forms, including humanity, is in fact so great that it is difficult to grasp for even well-informed experts. This in the same week that NASA announced that 2020 was the hottest year on record. And whilst we remain gripped by the pandemic crisis that is causing real suffering for many, as a society, we will pull through. There will be a post-pandemic, or at least a post-crisis, when we will have learned a new normal and ways to live alongside the virus. In terms of the environmental emergency, a crisis of a different sort, this is not necessarily true. Last month's local authorities and the 6th Carbon Budget Report from the National Climate Change Committee observed that more than half the emissions cuts needed to achieve net zero rely on take-up of low carbon solutions at local and individual level. It appealed to government for appropriate long-term financing, policy and powers, and more flexibility in place of top-down solutions to support those local authorities whose aspirations, like ours, are more ambitious than those of our national government. I'm going to tell you the great things we are doing as a local authority and how hard we are all working. However, I am afraid that I must also warn you that it is not enough, and that we are not receiving the support we need, whether in terms of money or leadership from national government. Back in October 2019, here in Baines, we identified that our greatest carbon emission savings could be achieved in transport, energy efficiency in buildings, and in power through renewable electricity generation and energy storage capacity. We could not then have foreseen the devastating year to follow. In March 2020, just as we were planning a climate emergency launch event in the Guildhall, the pandemic hit. It continues to bring tragedy, to decimate council income along with the wider economy, and has hit council staff hard as they have coordinated the COVID major incident response, whilst covering for sick and self-isolating colleagues, homeschooling their children, undertaking other caring responsibilities. Council and community have come together despite this difficult context to take real action in tackling the environmental emergencies. So what have we been doing over the last year? Our policies determine the future shape of our community, so our priority must be to ensure that carbon and ecological literacy underlie all council policy, particularly in our most carbon emitting spheres, transport and buildings. Policy making is not glamorous and can be frustratingly slow, but we will not shy away from the difficult decisions needed to turn the oil tanker. To this end, we brought forward the Liverpool Neighbourhoods Policy last month. This evidence-based policy supports changes to residential areas at communities' request, encouraging use of alternatives to the car. We're consulting now on proposed changes to planning policy to ensure local developments reflect our environmental priorities. And I encourage residents to participate. Please let us know your thoughts. We have been talking to residents in person before COVID and by webinar since. We're developing a vision for a post-COVID economy in Bath and North East Somerset, a green renewal built on localism, sustainable tourism, jobs in new green industries. We aim to capitalise upon those pandemic-caused changes that have been positive for the environment, such as closer communities, coming to one another's aid, greater public appreciation of our green spaces, and increased interest in food growing and home cooking, reduced food waste and less commuting. Forthcoming activities include energy efficient retrofit of the council's estate, increased renewables capacity, improved procurement strategy, planting 100,000 trees, and a climate literacy training programme for staff, to which all councillors are invited. We've been stock taking our current ecological activities, strengths and weaknesses, and will develop an action plan in the coming months. So you can see, councillors, that both officers and the administration have been working very hard at a time of ever more constrained budgets and COVID-induced upheaval. We are initiating numerous important streams of work that will reduce our emissions. I end and thank all my hardworking colleagues and officers from across the council for their important contributions and move the recommendations in the report.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Warren. So the recommendations have been moved. I believe I've got Tim Ball as a seconder. Tim?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Council, tonight we have a chance to show how this council can move forward with a project that is so important to us all in this meeting and to the wider communities, as the effects of what we do tonight will stretch long into the future. Or we can retreat to tribal politics and throw brickbats around. I know what I prefer, United Council leading the way forward, all our residents working together to attempt to address the climate change and ecological emergency that is facing us all. In any plan that is so forward thinking, we will have hiccups from items already going through the system. And these will be sometimes hard to stop or reverse them. But we are trying, although sometimes it may not be as quick as some would like to think it should be. I would like to pay special tribute to Councillor Warren and all the council officers who are working on this project, taking it forward and for the out-of-box thinking that has been required. It's also important to recognise the work of all councillors of all parties who've been working hard at this through the scrutiny process and the planning process. Let's remember, we're all in this together. Work on the refresh of the local plan will see a change in policies, will put climate change and nature emergency at the centre of planning policies and allow rapid change in the way we all live, think and act. Changes to ensure that revolve around providing good homes for people to live in that are low carbon or carbon neutral, and installation of electric points for recharging vehicles are essential ways that we move forward with this new green way of living and thinking. Retrofitting of all buildings to allow as far as possible carbon neutralities could be essential if we're going to reach carbon neutral status by 2030. There is still a huge mountain to climb before we get there, but by all working together, we will get there. Council, it's down to you how much you support this evening. I certainly hope you will. I therefore second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. So we've got recommendations moved and seconded. Those are recommendations in the paper item 2. I've got a very long list of speakers. So the first off the rank is Councillor May, then Jess David. So Councillor May, please.
Thank you, Chair. In society, there have been many major public issues that require significant attention. For example, back in the 1930s, the Public Health Acts, the Health and Safety at Work Act, equalities legislation, and now the major issue of global warming. The Prime Minister has shown leadership by announcing a 10-point plan, laying out measures to scale up the nation's climate ambitions for the UK to achieve its net zero emissions target by 2050. This includes offshore wind power, accelerating electric vehicles, infrastructure improvements, greater public transport systems, promoting cycling and walking, industries, homes, public buildings and nature, all covered by our current policies. At a local level, we can and should influence our own abilities within the organisation's delivery of services. Use our pension fund to invest in businesses that reduce their carbon emissions in accordance with the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement on climate change. Producing planning policies which, as Councillor Ball has mentioned, promote development of households to improve their climate initiatives, and electric vehicles and the ecology impacts of developments that affect people. These are still early days, and like any period of change, mistakes will be made, priorities argued about, and society may need time to understand the need. But the pandemic has shown us that there are different ways of working, and the public embracing the countryside is an ecological challenge for the future, which I fully agree and support with. And I therefore support this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. I've got Councillor Jess David, then Dave Wood. So Councillor David first, please.
Thank you. And thank you to Sarah and officers for this excellent report. It's clear that despite the pressures of the last year, considerable work is taking place, and climate change and the nature emergencies are at the centre of our plans for the future. There are 3 areas in which I wanted to comment this evening. Firstly, on planning policy. I'm delighted that we're taking action to update the local plan so that its policies will more fully reflect our commitments to the environment. With regards to the planning application for land to the rear of English Combe Lane, which is also called the Tufa Field, and has been mentioned this evening and is in my ward, I also wanted to note that I share the concerns of many residents. As a site of nature conservation interest, I hope that this administration will still be able to reconsider plans for this site. I also want to say that I'm very grateful for the considerable amount of time that Councillor Romero has already spent listening to residents' concerns, and I fully recognise that this is a project that was designed by and inherited from a previous administration. More widely, our commitment to secure a net gain from biodiversity from all future major developments is really important, but I wanted to stress that this is not an easy fix, and any off-site delivery must make a meaningful contribution to local nature networks. These should be opportunities to put back what has been lost over several decades and to increase connectivity. I very much welcome the work that has been done at a regional level to create nature recovery network maps, and these show where there are opportunities to make real improvements. I hope that at Baines level we can build on this to create a local delivery plan for nature, which will identify priority habitats we will improve and where, and show how planning contributions will help to do this. Secondly, I wanted to talk about people power. We are really lucky to have an informal army of volunteers across Baines who help us to look after parks and green spaces, picking up litter, planting trees and so much more. I look forward to seeing how this council will further harness and invest in this amazing resource and work with these groups to make real ecological improvements to our parks and green spaces. And thirdly, on climate change, we have set a clear goal for Baines to become carbon neutral by 2030 in order to reduce the contribution that we make to global emissions. However, we also need to plan for a level of climate change that is already locked in, potentially as high as 4 degrees warming. Adaptation planning takes time, especially for infrastructure, buildings and the natural environment, and this means we need to start now to avoid the levels of risk that we face in 2050 and beyond. So in future reports, I would really welcome some information on how we plan to adapt, what we are doing to prevent the future overheating of homes, to look at shading in public spaces and to look at more sustainable water consumption. I want to end again by thanking Sarah and officers for their dedication to this work, and I look forward to the further progress that we will no doubt make over the next year, and I would urge colleagues from across the chamber to support this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Thank you very much. I've got Dave Wood and Alistair Singleton. So Councillor Wood, please.
To change the whole culture of a council to be based around the climate emergency is really no mean feat. Changing council planning policies to account for the climate emergency will make a huge impact on our area and on the world for years to come. Stretching targets that we've adopted, like planting 100,000 trees by 2023, really make us national climate leaders in the drive and ambition of this council. Planting of thousands of trees is well underway, and our communities and our volunteer groups have really stepped up to do their part as part of this, inspired by our collective ambition. I want tree planting to touch every ward in Baines, to put ward councillors and their communities at the heart of this work. But above all, I would like to welcome this report, to thank Sarah and the officers for the work that's gone into this in this incredibly challenging year.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. So I've got Councillor Singleton, then Grant Johnson. So Alistair, please. Oh, you're on mute, Alistair.
Apologies, technical issues as usual. The report before us this evening is eloquent testimony to the hard work and dedication of Sarah's brilliant, under-resourced and overstretched sustainability team. They deserve our unstinting thanks and admiration for their inspiration and commitment. The report sketches the first steps on the roadmap to address our very positive and hugely ambitious net zero by 2030 target. And I'm particularly excited by a number of high potential renewable energy projects which will launch during this year, some driven by Baines itself, others by commercial partners, and many working with local people in our community. But the context is bleak, and in truth, it is still getting worse rather than better with every day that passes. A significant number of climate scientists and experts believe that it is already too late, that catastrophic climate change is now inevitable. Many others, perhaps most, fear that outcome because there is as yet no evidence available which shows a clear path to avoiding it. At risk of using a cliche devalued in recent years by political cynicism, we really are all in this together. This morning, when my relatively efficient oil condensing boiler sprung to life and began belching CO2 into the rather damp Chew Valley air. It was bracing to think that that pollution will continue to poison our ecosystem long after I am gone. More shocking, perhaps, to know that its persistence in the atmosphere will outlive my children as well. The scale of the challenge we face demands that we all play our part from now onwards and lead by example in our communities. It may require painful sacrifices and compromises and lead to uncomfortable bedfellows. Let's never again see the disdain shown by some in the chamber this time last year, when others wore Extinction Rebellion logos in support for XR's wholly laudable goals and non-violent means, or the pious criticism of those who are proud to stand and march with the school strikers. In parallel, let's ensure there's no temptation haughtily to dismiss developers with interesting plans or engineers and entrepreneurs with ideas to tackle carbon. Prejudice, tribalism, and not invented here syndrome have no place in this. We are at our best when we work together. Confronting this challenge will call for determination and courage. As climate scientist Kate Marvel so wisely has observed, courage is the resolve to do well without the assurance of a happy ending. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. So I've got Grant Johnson, then Paul Meyer. So Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chair. What we were supposed to be receiving today is a progress report on the climate and ecological emergency. But when you strip away all the corporate jargon and buzzwords relating to the Council's endless visions, we appear to have a report of little measurable progress. Since we received the last report a year ago, it almost feels like this Council thinks progress is measured more by its own failings than anything else. Do I need to remind members that during the first lockdown, it was this council that approved planning for 3 large fossil fuel burning gas generators in Midsummer Norton? So, any notion, let alone targets, of being carbon neutral by 2030 has gone straight out the window. Now, if there was one positive that came from that ongoing and sorry saga, it's that it gave the Lib Dem administration the kick up the backside it needed to finally start the process of updating local planning policy to prevent it being allowed in the first place. You would think that after such an embarrassing episode, the administration would have learnt its lesson, but sadly not this one. Now, we currently have a public petition with over 3,700 signatures demanding that action be taken to protect the Tufa Field in Englishcombe Lane. It would seem that the declaration of a climate and ecological emergency was just words with very little substance. And I guess that's my general argument. There is really little point in declaring these emergencies without the follow-up and urgent action that is required to defeat them. What's measured matters. So this council needs to be setting itself clear and achievable targets. One of the few targets that does appear in this report and was mentioned earlier is the wish to plant 100,000 trees by 2023. We should be achieving 5,000 in 2020-21. So at that rate, we can already add it to the growing list of Lib Dem failures. I only have one vision, unlike this council, and it's that we can leave this world in a better place for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. So I've got Councillor Myers, then Joe Wright. So Paul, yours.
Given the Conservative government under Boris Johnson is showing such strong leadership with a 10-point plan to drive this issue forward, I strongly support this area of policy for future generations. However, what concerns me about this is of this very administration. In detail under recommendations, we're being asked to support strategic repositioning of the core climate and ecological emergency policy. So why have we had all the public outcry and consternation about this administration's actions since the last administration, I note, in relation to the rare and precious ecology being, we're told, destroyed at Tufa Fields in Bath? No excuses about it being an inherited policy, frankly wash. I do find it unedifying that this council has faced criticism over its own development company building 37 new homes on what many people regard as a nature reserve in English Combe Lane, Bath. The administration could have withdrawn this planning application, which I believe was eventually and finally approved only a month after declaring the ecological emergency in the authority. Whilst the council I know refutes the claims of campaigners, it doesn't really send the right message, to put it mildly, does it? I gather that there are plans to capture and remove, as part of the overall ecology, slow worms, being a protected species, to another newly created habitat elsewhere, but there are equal claims that some have already been destroyed. Surely, despite all the excuses we've heard tonight this evening, the only conclusion is that at best, this administration is failing to set a good example, and at worst is guilty of gross hypocrisy, i.e., do as I say, not as I do. Please could I request that the administration provide an urgent update on its plans for the Tufa Field at the earliest possible opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. So I've got Councillor Wright, then Councillor Michael Evans. So Councillor Wright first, please.
The commitment made by all the parties at this council in early 2019 was to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. Let's remind ourselves why we made this commitment. Because the world is on fire, and in the words of President of the World Economic Forum, unless we grab this very small window and make significant change to the way we all live, we might as well be arranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. This week, Professor John Abraham, a thermal scientist, has published data in the Advances in Atmospheric Science journal, showing that the last 5 years have been the hottest ever recorded. The oceans have been the world's thermostat control for millennia, but humans are now dumping heat into the oceans at such an alarming rate, it is the equivalent to 5 or 6 Hiroshima bombs exploding every second of every day, 7 days a week. The oceans are now warming at a significant rate. This matters because the oceans are the engines of our weather. The increased levels of heat lead to increasing floods, droughts, storms. These acts of nature affect all of us, our water supply, our food supply, where we can or cannot live. Transport has been a major emitter of carbon and is one of the few industries with an increasing carbon output. The commitment in this paper is a shift to mass transit, a shift to walking, and a shift to cycling. Since coming into office, the Liberal Democrats have been working hard to enable this necessary shift to sustainable transport. Cabinet have agreed to the Livable Neighbourhood Policy, which seeks to implement low traffic neighbourhoods, residence parking zones, and electric vehicle charging. This council is working to put in place other sustainable transport related schemes, including a mass transit corridor between Bath and Bristol, an express A4 bus route connecting Wiltshire to Bath, the clean air zone, e-cargo bikes and last mile deliveries, alone bike schemes and e-scooters. We are presently consulting on a transport delivery action plan for Bath. But local councils cannot do this work alone. We need leadership at a national level that goes beyond rhetoric and predatory delay and delivers on real funding to support the 25% reduction in vehicle miles per person required if we are to make the deadline. The government needs to make changes to web tag and economic tick box exercise that local authorities are required to undertake that fails to understand biodiversity, health or social justice. Parliament needs to make sure appropriate time is in the diary to make changes to Part 6 of the Traffic Management Act. If the Conservative government is really committed to change, it would review the 29 billion committed to building new roads and give this to local authorities so that walking, cycling and mass transit options could be effectively delivered. This progress report requires that we all show leadership, that we all make difficult decisions in our local communities that enable sustainable change if we are to make sure that our seats are not deck chairs. I therefore support this report.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. So I've got Michael Evans and Alison Bourne. So Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's obviously some gap between the visions and rhetoric and the actual practice reflected in the report, but I do broadly welcome it, especially the progress that's been achieved in spite of the severe challenge of the coronavirus pandemic. and I shall be voting to note it. But I would like to add some perspective to the local campaign. The UK produces less than 1% of global warming emissions, and Baines produces a tiny proportion of that 1%. So as we move forward in our local initiatives, it's vital that we remain aware of the larger context. As the report acknowledges, the UK Conservative government has been active in leading and innovating in the climate change battle, and I would like to take a moment to remind the Council of some of the key advances. First, the government has set its ambitious, legally binding target of zero net carbon by 2050. Of course, it's easy to set targets and much more challenging to achieve them, but the government has shown its seriousness with the newly established Cabinet Committee on Climate Change, which will guide the development of the necessary specific actions. One of the most dramatic of those actions so far is the decision to end the sales of internal combustion engine vehicles by 2030. Greenpeace hailed this as an historic turning point on climate action. The whole globe will benefit a little from the global warming gas reduction, but the direct health benefits locally will be dramatic wherever pollution from road vehicles is a problem, and of course that includes our area. Another government action already in full swing is the investment in renewable energy sources, especially offshore wind and including floating wind turbines. Recently, 47% of the country's energy was supplied by renewables, a figure which would have been astonishing only a few years ago, and that proportion continues to rise. The further way ahead has been set out in the government's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, which has been referred to, published last November. This is a very welcome contrast, this document, to the zero-sum thinking that some campaigners adopt. Some people more or less advocate a cancellation of the first industrial revolution and a return to nobly grinding poverty. This would cause at least as much human misery as the global warming would. The government's plan, by contrast, seizes on the growth and levelling up opportunities of a green economy, with opportunities for highly paid employment, especially in the areas of the country which have suffered most from deindustrialisation. At our local level, we can be a pilot or testbed for the wider society, just as the UK will hopefully be a light to guide other parts of the world, beginning with the COP26 in Glasgow later this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. That's a lot of food for thought there. I've got Councillor Bourne, then Councillor Kevin Guy. So, Councillor Bourne, please, Alison.
Thank you. The catastrophic climate events and the pandemic of 2020 have provided a stark reminder of the power of nature and its destructive potential. I'm delighted that Bath and North East Somerset is demonstrating real commitment to tackling both climate change and the ecological emergency, has a clear plan of action and is making progress despite the challenges of the past year. The pandemic has caused great hardship and has forced us to change our behaviour. As the vaccine allows us to emerge from isolation in the coming months, we must seize the opportunity to build back better and create a more sustainable future. Our plans to address the climate and ecological emergencies provide a framework for this essential work and are to be commended. I urge colleagues from across the Council to recognise the progress that has been made and is being made, and to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. So I've got Kevin Guy, then Vic Pritchard. So Councillor Guy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to start by thanking all the officers and Councillor Warren for their hard work in putting together such an excellent report. This is the biggest fight of our generation, and we could argue of any generation that has been. To this end, we as councillors from all parties must play our part, but crucially, the tool of education must be deployed to its full potential. To this end, I would like to thank the work of the Schools Climate Network, and I promise to encourage all schools within Baines to become eco-schools, and with maintained an academy and private schools, to encourage them to take steps to reduce their significant carbon footprint in our area. I would hope that all councillors would support the council and schools in this crucial endeavour. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Guy. So I've got Vic Pritchard and then Karen Warrington. So Vic, yours. Oh, you're on mute, Vic.
Beg your pardon.
I do appreciate the tremendous amount of work in compiling this long-awaited paper, but as presented, I find it hugely disappointing. I feel we are foregoing the opportunity to be innovative and national leaders in our approach in countering the adverse effects of climate change. So much of what is being considered is just an expansion of present practice, and some of the new initiatives warrant concern. It's creditable that the government's monies of 585,000 has been secured as an affordable warmth grant, but previously we experienced extreme difficulty to administer a £50,000 grant allocation through lack of take-up. There appears to be a commitment to rapid and large-scale increase in renewable energy, which could commit the council to forfeiting prime agricultural land in direct conflict with their bid to promote sustainable farming. In a bid to align planning policies with climate and ecological energy requirements, it should be within the scope of all new building developments to orientate dwellings with a south-facing perspective, and in doing so, accommodate solar panels to best effect. The paper also promotes to commission local renewable energy companies when this has previously failed in a succession of authorities, to include our neighbouring authority of Bristol, accounting a £15 million loss for each year of its operation. Surely we should not wish to duplicate this practice. Worldwide, it has been recognised that wetland areas offer the most natural effective source of absorbing CO2, and we are being lost, and that are being lost at an alarming rate. Yet we here in Baines have the opportunity to construct our own wetland area in Keynsham. I understand there is a section 106 section agreement to that effect that has not been implemented. A similar project on the outskirts of London has proved to be the second most visited attraction nationally, as well as countering the effects of climate change. As key partners, the paper states that the two universities and the RUH are developing their own climate strategies, but surprisingly, we have no idea what they might be. How likely are we to be duplicating efforts? I think there's a whole lot more work to be done.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. So I've got Karen Warrington and then Sean Stevenson McGaw. So Karen, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am going to support this report because I do believe that we need to act, and I recognise that work has gone into this report, but I do have reservations regarding the implementation of policies, and I wondered whether I had missed the reference to the climate emergency declaration, which predates this council. I do hope and implore this council supports the government's climate and ecological emergency bill. It's a time to embrace national, authority-wide and parish-wide initiatives. Although I have some issues, I don't believe that it's for Cabinet to negate questions relating to climate and nature issues, which I've brought up in our rural areas, and I feel I've been dismissed out of hand when these could easily have been investigated further. I'm going to give you two small but important examples. And they're certainly important to people in rural areas. The first relates to light pollution, and there are two challenges. One is 24-hour and/or high wattage lighting on commercial premises, and the other is light spillage from residential extensions. I can tell you that high wattage light impacts not only on the ecology, but on humans. We have a number of rare species of bats, and these are protected under international law, or European law, I should say. We have a duty to protect these. Secondly, there is a trend for large picture windows, glass doors, etc. on the edge of green fields in residential properties, and there appears no way of putting conditions on all the extensions to include a limit of light spill into open land, home to plenty of ecology. Mitigation is not too expensive. If a homeowner is willing to pay a large amount for an extension, automated roof blinds are cheap. My second issue is curb lowering for new drives and the insistence that they should be tarmacked or block paved. I've seen what happens with this. We can have grass. In addition, I'd like to raise concerns regarding the livable neighbourhoods. I am concerned, as I mentioned earlier, there are times when people have to have cars. They may not be able to walk on a temporary basis, or they may be disabled. I'd like to ask why there isn't any creativity to deal with these issues. I also urge you to ensure that the huge renewable energy solutions are not situated in the rural areas outside Bath. Many residents do support renewable energy, but they'd like to support moderate areas, not huge areas. Climate and ecological emergency policies should not be all or nothing or predominantly borne by one locality, but they should be very creative. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you for that. So I've got Sean Stevenson-McGall, then Richard Samuel. So Councillor Stevenson-McGall, please.
Thank you very much. Bath and North East Somerset Council is the administering authority for Avon Pension Fund, and as a result, 5 Baines councillors, including myself, are playing a key role in ensuring that the £5 billion worth of assets under our management on the behalf of our staff, deferred members and pensioners is invested wisely to both meet our fiduciary duty and is done in a responsible way and takes in full account of environmental, social and corporate governance issues. As the Vice Chair of the Fund and as Chair of the Investment Panel, I have worked with Councillor Bruce Shern, the Chair, to oversee a strategic review of our investment strategy this last year. This was adopted in September 2020. The review included ensuring that we have an evidence-based climate change modelling designed to inform our long-term objectives and targets relating to the climate emergency and the direction of travel for investments in alternative energy and low carbon solutions. The fund's approach to responsible investing is based upon the following principles. As a long-term investor, we need to seek long-term sustainable returns. Management of our ESG risk is consistent with the fund's fiduciary duty. The climate emergency poses a long-term financial risk to the fund. ESG issues are integrated at all stages of the investment decision-making process, and that our strategies and policies must be evidence-based. As a result, we agreed to address the climate emergency in several ways, including setting clear targets to ensure that the portfolios are aligned to the Paris Agreement ambitions to limit global warming to below 2 degrees, and to increase the target allocation to renewable infrastructure from 2.5% to 5% of our assets, and to increase our allocation to sustainable equities to 10% of our assets. As a result, over 50% of our shareholdings, around £1 billion, is targeted to be invested in sustainable and low carbon equities. Sustainable equity portfolios seek to maximise exposure to companies that are responsible for responding positively to the challenges of the climate emergency whilst maximising our financial returns. The fund's long-term ambition, however, is to invest all our equity assets in sustainable low carbon equities, and we're having a review on that this year. On behalf of Councillor Shern and myself, can we thank our officers, our external advisors, Councillors Dando, May and Rigby for their support and ongoing commitment to ensuring Avon Pension Fund continues to play its part in tackling the climate emergency, as we also meet the fiduciary duty to our current and deferred members and our pensioners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson-McGall. Yeah, and your thanks there are duly noted. Thank you very much. So I've got Richard Samuel, then Robin Moss. So Councillor Samuel, please, next.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, at the start of this meeting, I was really sorry to hear the egregious statement full of its sanctimonious piffle that introduced this council meeting and is very unhelpful in creating cross-party consensus. The facts are that nationally we will not meet carbon reduction targets. We are unlikely to meet what were EU water quality targets. As Councillor Wright has said, road spending dwarfs sustainable transport investment, and national air pollution targets are unlikely to be reached. That is the blunt truth, and that's why we need to take action. Now, I think this report is an honest update of the progress to date, but I wanted to say to Council that this administration takes this work very seriously indeed. And to that end, I can announce tonight that I will be ensuring in the forthcoming budget that appropriate finances are made available to support climate change action over the coming year and years. Now, I just hope that all members of this council tonight will welcome this report and reject the sort of party politicking negativity that we heard at the start of our meeting. We are better than that. Let's work together to tackle this existential crisis. And let's leave that negativity behind where it belongs and work together to produce proper solutions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Samuel. So I've got Robin Moss, then Bharat Pakania. So Councillor Moss, please.
Thank you. First of all, like most councillors, don't disagree or argue at all with the principles behind this report. And I certainly wouldn't disagree with Sarah's statement in moving the report or the hard work and sincerity that's gone into the report. It kind of outlines where we are, and it outlines ideas for how we make a difference. But how do we actually judge success, and how do we measure where we are? And it's interesting to hear from Sean.
You've frozen on us, Robin.
We're doing and from this report. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Right,
Carry on, Robin.
Okay. Have another 30 seconds.
So not that long.
And it's not just a question of numbers for numbers' sake. I'm a great believer of the principle. It doesn't matter how many times you measure the pig. It doesn't make it a happier pig or a healthier pig. But what we do need are some judgments about success and failure to understand the consequences of actions being taken, not only by ourselves, but also changes in the wider world. And as you know, I'm a great believer in the Department for Unforeseen Consequences. So, for example, there's been quite a few speakers who've been talking about people investing in our houses. That becomes more difficult when we head into recession and people have less household income. But it's also an example is that one measurement could be if we are more successful in reducing private cars coming into Bath, then we should be seeing a reduction in the council's income from car parking. Yet, of course, with the pandemic and the distrust that there is in public transport, we're actually, like having the past in the last few months, unlikely to see a long-term rise in parking income. So what I would say, and certainly we'll be supporting this report, as a council, we have got many levers at our disposal to initiate change, but we don't fully understand the consequences of our actions. And we need to have a robust set of measurable outputs and outcomes to help us judge how we're doing, how we need to adjust what we're doing in order to move and succeed in what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moss. Very timely, so thank you. I've got Councillor Bharat Pakania and then Matt McKay. So Bharat, please, first.
The current coronavirus pandemic is an early signal that all is not well with mankind and planetary sustainability. There will be a lot worse to come if we continue with both global warming and encroachments into the ecosystems of other creatures. Whilst it is easy to say that environmental degradation and global warming issues are a great big global problem, we cannot do much personally or locally or at a city level. I say, from little acorns grow giant oaks. We can and must set an example and become a leader and an exemplar city. We have to invest in sustainability and live in harmony and with the finite planetary resources that we have. We must take all necessary measures by reducing excessive consumption, encourage local sustainable tourism, transport, and housing. We must respect our planet and learn to understand the consequences of our actions, readdress the human-made imbalances, and finally, reduce consumption of animals and use of animal products. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pacania, much appreciated. So, got Councillor Matt McCabe next, please.
Thank you, Chair. A number of things, but obviously I have to be careful what I say. I'm going to send Councillor Johnson a Friends of the Earth report entitled Switching On, How Renewables Will Power the National Grid, and it charts the National Grid strategy for getting us to 96% renewables on the grid. He may be disappointed with how they plan to manage that last 4%, so I'll send that to him. There's obviously reference to a petition, and I'd like to correct a couple of points on that. The petition refers to the field off English Combe Lane as a nature reserve. It's not a nature reserve, it never has been. It's a SNCI, a site of national conservation interest. The petition also describes the new site as a brownfield site. Again, that's not true. It's a greenfield site. It's on the same geology. It has its own Tufa spring. And obviously rather clever, calling it the Tufa field, because it obviously conflates in people's mind the degraded grassland habitat with the valuable Tufa habitat. But apart from that, I will move on. And I will just say that to anyone who's watching and who wants to do something for the climate emergency in the way of tree planting, I've been involved in helping More Trees Baines set up its first community tree nursery. There are another ones being set up around the city of Bath. And the first donated weeds from people's gardens is how they've all started, these little saplings, came in the autumn. And the first 100 have gone out to be planted. So this summer, if you want to make a small contribution, then instead of throwing away weeds from your gardens, which happen to be small saplings, put them in a pot and next autumn bring them to your nearest community tree nursery. We'll grow them on for a year and then give them to More Trees Baines, we're not for profit, and they will find somewhere to plant them. So we planted our first 100, so you can knock 100 off the list of your aspirations for trees to plant. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCabe. So I've completed the list of speakers. Appreciate everyone being as fast and speedy as possible. It was a long list. I'm going back to Councillor Sarah Warren now to sum up now. Sarah, I know there's a huge amount of points raised there, and I was going to ask that you summarise as best you can, but there may be others that you want to write down and actually email us to inform us what we're actually doing. So bear that in mind when you sum up.
Yes, happy to come back to individual councillors with specific points they've raised. It is a bit disappointing, given the scale of the challenge that we've got to tackle together, that one or two have chosen this important topic to stoop to party political point scoring. And it has been quite fascinating to hear the critique of the English Combe Lane housing development, proudly proposed to council by former Councillor Goodman as part of the placemaking plan when he was cabinet member in July 2017 and again in November 2017 as part of the local plan, which was a time when the parlous state of UK ecology was well known because we live in one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. Of course, none of us wants to see any site of nature conservation degraded, and we're working on strong ecological protections across the district. As usual, some of the Conservatives have missed the big picture and see ecological and climate issues as political footballs, single issues. The Tory government lost no more than 8 days after casting off the environmental protections afforded by the EU before going back on their unlikely promises of a green Brexit and authorising use of a pesticide poisonous to bees for use on UK sugar beet. This at a time when the health of our pollinator populations on which we depend for a third or more of our food are in free fall. And this month, they've given the green light to the construction of a new coal mine in Cumbria, set to produce 2.78 million tonnes of coking coal a year, pumping 8.4 million tonnes of carbon into the atmosphere. As you've heard, the council's work to date has been about putting in place some of the building blocks that will provide for more exciting developments to reduce our environmental impact in future. In this year of the COP26 United Nations Climate Conference to be held in Glasgow in the autumn, we look to national government for greater delegation of powers to local authorities, more inspired leadership in this field and adequate funds to support councils in their response. It has been really positive to have heard the support expressed this evening, as well as the feedback I've received from the wider community over the last 2 years. As you've heard, we're doing an enormous amount of detailed work to ensure we have the policies in place so that we can pull our weight as a district in countering these twin environmental emergencies, and we can aspire to becoming an exemplar of sustainability in a World Heritage setting. I move the recommendations in the report and I encourage all councillors to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Warren. So there seems to be a view to supporting this. So I will take that as the majority position and ask those, and I know we need pauses yet to vote on this, but I'll ask those who wish to vote against to make it clear now, please, in the chat. So those against, please. I'm getting the indication that there's none against. So I think I'd like to go to those abstaining, please. Yeah, that's right. Abstentions are coming through. Thank you. Any other abstentions, please? Yeah, okay, we're getting some abstentions through. Okay, Joe, so it's over to you now to do the counting.
So far we have 3 abstentions, no votes against, which means 55, 56.
Yeah, was Councillor Watts back now, is he? Councillor Watts back in the room?
He was at the start of the shortly after.
Okay, yeah, we'll take that as given then.
So 3 abstentions.
Yeah, so 3 abstentions. I think we paused long enough there, everyone. So that's clearly carried with 3 abstentions. Thank you, everyone. So considering the time, a personal needs break for 5 minutes, please. Please turn off your mics and cameras as you leave for the break, and it will be 5 minutes. So I hope to see you back here ASAP. Thank you.
Yeah, no. You all right? Is it so? I'm just trying to find it. What's that? Yeah, Zoom. What are you trying to find? What are you trying to find? The Zoom. To vote?
Okay, everyone, are we all back? 5 minutes gone, thank you. So if we'd like to swiftly move on, we've got item 7 on the agenda, Food Poverty Action Plan. I believe Councillor Appleyard is to move, please.
Thank you, Chair. Tens of thousands of families in the UK every year do not have enough food to live on and are turning to sources of support from charitable organisations within their communities. This new challenge of growing hunger for some of the least well-off people in the country has emerged alongside a wide-ranging and draconian restructuring of this country's welfare system. With reductions in welfare support year on year, the number of people, including families with children, going hungry is rising at an alarming rate and represents a significant development in a country with the world's 5th largest economy. The right to food is a fundamental human right and is contained in several international treaties to which the UK has long been committed. This right, however, remains unrealised for the increasing number of people, many of whom are families with children who are living on the breadline. Britain's largest national food bank charity, the Trussell Trust, has documented a 5,000% increase in emergency food parcels distributed between 2008 and 2018. In that 10 years, this growing food bank network went from distributing just under 26,000 parcels a year to handing out more than 1.33 million of them. Many poor families in the UK report increasing hunger. This increase comes despite the efforts of domestic anti-poverty campaigners, charitable food groups, schools and community centres trying to fill the gap. Government policies are either not addressing rising hunger or even worse, even exacerbating it. This country is the 5th largest economy in the world with the public spending of approximately 39% of GDP. And if this pandemic has not shown us anything, it's the real need for action in the area of food insecurity. It has considerable resources at its disposal to ensure that its poorest families and children do not go hungry and fall through the net. Yet this UK government is failing to do so. It is failing in particular to ensure that the changes it has made to its welfare structures prevents children and families from falling through that safety net. We should be ashamed of how this is happening. In March 2020, this council agreed to develop a food policy strategy and identify and respond to the problems that challenges the growing numbers of our residents. Our excellent public health team picked up the challenge, and what is before you is a report on the significant progress made. This progress, despite the demands of this team to be at the front of supporting us during the pandemic. At this point, I would like to recognise our officers and mention the contributions from Cathy McMahon, who's now heavily involved with the COVID support work, Millie Carmichael and Sarah Heathcote. There is one other section of contribution I would like us to recognise, and that is the working group, chaired by the Senior Public Health Officer, Becky Reynolds, which includes a large cross-section of organisations and groups within Baines, and includes 2 of our own councillors, Councillor Ruth Malloy and Councillor Liz Hardman. There are over 30 groups and organisations making valuable contributions to this work. It is reassuring that our three food banks are represented on the working group. And again, I recognise the invaluable work that Councillor Alan Hale and his team in Keynsham Food Bank, which is significant as the challenges by our more rural communities can be slightly different from those in the city and will be the focus moving forward. It is with gratitude we must also recognise the continual generosity of our residents that give to all of our 3 food banks. Without their ongoing support, the picture will be very different for many families. In front of you is a report on the progress of the action plan, and importantly identifies the development of food pantries or similar names, which is something because it is a method of support, brings an element of dignity at a time when self-confidence may be at its lowest. It enables additional needs pantry members to be identified and responded to. Although we should be recognised as a support structure that has been created, particularly with organisations such as Fair Share Southwest, who are key to the access and distribution of a range of food from manufacturers that have been either overproduced or just surplus, we must be very cautious. A solution which is predicated on another problem of overproduction cannot be sustainable, and that is why we must all work together to eradicate the causes of food insecurity, starting with maybe a revisit of our previous work on the living wage. We must work together to ensure our community has the tools of food management, reducing waste, and even to home growing and community growers. This, together with lobbying our MPs for appropriate changes to our welfare system, reversed the decline in support. Both MPs have been lobbied, and it was recognised the MP Vera Hobhouse initiated an appeal towards school meal situation. This sat alongside the focus that Councillor Kevin Guy promoted, ensuring school holidays didn't mean a time of severe hardship. As it indicated, I proposed to the Council that they consider the information of this report, note the significant developments of progress made, and the Council is asked to reaffirm its commitment to addressing food poverty as a whole Council issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleyard. So just make sure everyone's clear that those last few statements that Councillor Appleyard made was him moving section 2.1 of the report. So I've got Councillor Liz Harben, please, to second, I believe.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to second this report, which is an update on the work of the Public Health Team and Food Poverty Steering Group. What is impressive about this is that it doesn't propose a sticking plaster approach of crisis intervention, but it takes the long-term view as to how food poverty needs to be reduced and then eventually eradicated. The action plan did involve immediate short-term crisis intervention initially to deal with the huge increase in numbers seeking food aid at the start of the pandemic, and coordinated without duplication help across council and charities. Food poverty, as it's called in this report, household food insecurity, is rooted in social justice, in social and economic inequality. You cannot eradicate it without looking at its root causes. Poverty. Poverty through insecure employment, cuts in targeted services and welfare provision, and low wages. An example of this, 74% of children living in poverty in Baines are in working families. And this is further compounded by the numbers of people living in debt, caused mainly by the 5-week delay in receiving universal credit. But referring again to the action plan, it doesn't just outline how to improve access to affordable food, but more broadly, it looks at what we call income maximisation, which is about support and advice around financial issues such as debt. Those in food poverty in Baines have already benefited from some of the outcomes of the action plan, from short-term emergency food provision to the medium term, including holiday schemes, fair food, and sustainable food, as in crop drop. Finally, this report reminds us that we as a council can play our part by championing the real living wage across contractors and local employers and services we commission, resulting in a fair and reliable income for people. The aim of this report, which we are to note, is to look at how eventually to reduce the number of people living in food insecure households and to eventually eliminate food poverty. And I hope you will all agree to note this. Thanks also to the Baines officers who prepared this very comprehensive and thorough report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz Harben. So we've got the recommendation as written in the paper moved and is now seconded. I've got a list of speakers, but I've got I've got Kevin Guy first, and I've actually got Paul Myers after that. So Kevin, over to you first, please.
Thank you, Chair. As lead member for Children's Services, I welcome the Food Poverty Action Plan update. The report details the strong multi-agency response to the challenges around food poverty and household food insecurity in Baines, and highlights the hard work undertaken to date. I welcome the significant role of the multi-agency steering group, which I'm a member. The 3 working groups are looking at income maximisation, food for all, and Hear My Voice, all crucial variables around the bigger food poverty issue. I fully endorse the public health-led plan development and integrated strategy on obesity, physical health and food for 2021. I also would like to make special thanks to officers, schools and the volunteer sector on responding to over 3,800 requests for free school meal vouchers over the Christmas period. Those families will be reassured that this authority will repeat this successful scheme over the half term, and we will be lobbying government to provide these funds for over the Easter break. This report is an excellent building block, and together we all have the responsibility to eradicate food poverty. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Guy. So I've got Paul Myers, then Alan Hell. So Councillor Myers first, please.
Thank you very much. prior to the meeting, I did raise with the Chief Executive my concern that on page 16 of the pack in section 3.3, for an officer report to write in terms of austerity in the way it was done, I actually suggested in a constructive manner that this be referred to as the view of the wider steering group so as to keep officers neutral. I've never seen a report before where it strays like this. I'm quite happy, and my group is to have such a point made. But having received an assurance that the mover of the motion would actually address this issue in the spirit of good debate, and was assured by the leader of the Lib Dems that this would be the case, Dina Romero, could it please be clarified now so that we can get this out of the way and not colour a very important debate for my group? And I think it should be a concern for every councillor that we keep our officers neutral. And I'm quite prepared to accept this clarification and set this aside so as to avoid any further discussion of it. If I can have that comment made, please.
Thank you, Councillor Mars. So I'd just like to pause the debate there a second and ask Councillor Romero whether she wants to make a response to that or whether it should be Councillor Appleyard. But this is not winding up the debate, okay? Just making this absolutely clear.
Yes, no, thank you. I was actually going to ask if Councillor Appleyard, who's been more closely associated with this report, could actually provide that clarification.
Yes, please. So we're not winding up the debate. I just want to make this clear. Rob.
Well, first of all, I will certainly protect the officers in writing this report. They've tried to do a very honest and level representation to council and have reflected on the facts that have been presented and are obviously being discussed through the working groups and everything like this. This is not the opinion of the officers to make a political statement within the report. All they've done is actually recognise the facts that exist within our community. Because the one thing you can't do, you can't pick and choose the inputs into any situation. And that's not said to have a dig at anybody, anything like this. But the one thing I will be absolutely certain of, the officers are very neutral in their positioning on this. They are not the political beasts. We are the political beasts. And I tried to cover that off at the beginning of my talk, where I did actually try and expand and indicate what happened over the last sort of 10 or so years in terms of the welfare state, and that was my opinion on there, and that wasn't reflected on what the officers were saying.
Okay. Thank you. I think that gives us the clarification you're seeking there, Councillor Myers.
Yes, thank you very, very much for that almost apology and clarification. And I think it's in the spirit of this council that we've addressed that and can now move on. So thank you very much.
Okay, appreciate it. So back to the debate, everyone. So I've got Councillor Alan Hale. Sorry for the delay, Councillor Hale. Over to you.
Well, all right. I'm not here to criticise anything. I mean, at the start of the pandemic, thousands of people have come to life to actually support those who are in food crisis. The feeling I just want to sort of reflect back from certainly the three Trussell Trust food banks that there are in Baines is that at times we have felt somewhat sidelined, with all of the new canteens, whatever you want to call them, coming forward. That has been the focus, and it is obviously part of the main focus. But please don't forget, and I appreciate that Rob Appleyard mentioned the Trussell Trust tonight, but please don't forget that there are three food banks within Baines working their socks off. I'm very fortunate that in mine in Keynsham, I've got 100 people on the volunteers list. At the moment, because we're delivery only, we don't need them all, but they are there, doing a fantastic job when they're needed. And you will have noted in the report that 124% increase on average across the Southwest for Trussell Trust food banks in April of last year compared with April the year before. For Keynsham last April, it was a 500% increase. And this fiscal year so far, we have fed 1,800 people. So the food banks, and you know, there's nothing different about ours. We're going to be, you will see that reflected in the other food banks as well. So please don't forget that there are food banks out there. There is no shame in people going to food banks. And often, not often, but at times I've heard that reflected, that we must take people away from having to go to a food bank. Well, we treat people with dignity because that's how they should be treated. And I would make the point that it's not all about people on credits or on universal benefit. Our biggest users, certainly I can only speak for Keynsham, are people who are in employment on low income. So it's a whole raft of people that come to food banks, and they shouldn't be afraid and they shouldn't be reluctant. And it would help if, when we address what we're doing about food poverty, was a bit more forthright in saying what the food banks within Baines are doing. And they've been doing it for, I mean, we opened in 2013 and we're the new ones. So, you know, please don't forget that the food banks are there.
Thank you, Councillor Hale. Points noted. So I've got Alison Bourne, then YK Kumar. So Councillor Bourne, please.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this comprehensive report, which demonstrates that Bath and North East Somerset has developed a series of effective local solutions to a problem that should not exist in one of the richest countries in the world. The actions described in the paper are akin to a sticking plaster, which is incredibly important, but the situation is precarious. Ongoing effort is needed to keep pace with increasing demand that is set to increase as the full impact of COVID is felt. And the current solution relies on the overproduction of food and the redistribution of that surplus, which is not sustainable and does not fit with our commitment to tackling the climate and ecological emergency. It is also worth noting the disruptive impact of Brexit on the cost and availability of some food, which may have an effect on current services and families. Responsibility for longer-term solutions sits with central government, and I'm pleased to see that one of our local MPs, Vera Hobhouse, is championing the National Food Strategy recommendations in Parliament. However, more must be done to address the structural issues and inequalities that have led to such an increase in food poverty over the past decade. As has previously been mentioned, many people in employment are unable now to cover the basic costs of living and need food support through free school meals, food banks, etc. It's also worth noting the correlation between the rollout of universal credit and the consequent development of food banks across the country. The underfunding of universal credit has necessitated the development of charitable services to fill gaps in provision. Bath and North East Somerset Council has played an active part, but this is not a long-term solution, and government action must be taken to address the causes rather than the effects, to give people confidence that they can afford to feed their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. Point noted. I've got Councillor Kumar, then Michael Evans. So YK, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I highly applaud the report and speech and the work of the cabinet members, of the MP, the councillors, of the officers. I acknowledge their hard work, and there is a personal story.
YK, do you want me to come back to you?
No, I will go ahead. Sorry, it reminds me of my childhood. And it's sickening to note that in this rich country, over 8.4 million people struggle to get enough food. Why? I I'm not an economist, but I have got huge interest with the data. In last 30 to 40 years, China, which has 1.4 billion people, and then they could alleviate poverty in such a manner that 800 million people are now completely out of poverty. 800 million people here. Our economy is just 3 times less than them. Our economy is about 5 trillion, theirs is about 14 trillion. But we have 20 times less people. But still, why do we have more than 10% people of our population not enough to eat? And this includes families with children, older people, disabled people, and people from minority communities. Now, I completely do not understand why this happens, a country which is so rich. And that's why it is so important that all of us today in this a small place in the county, we support this brilliant report and try that at least in our county, nobody has a problem of food. I also acknowledge the Trussell Trust, as Rob Capelliard mentioned. I remember in 2009-10, they supplied only 41,000 packages, and now they supply more than 1.6 to 1.7 million packages. So I acknowledge those work, and I appeal that we should work harder in whatever role we can. Thank you, and apologies for being emotional.
Noted. Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Much appreciated. Got Councillor Evans, then Ruth Malloy. Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very moving to listen to somebody who really cares there, Councillor Kumar. I was interested by his reference to China and the 800 million coming out of poverty. Of course, there was enormous poverty and famine when China was a communist country, but since it's adopted perestroika without glasnost, as it were, and gone over to some capitalist and sensible policies, it has indeed done its population enormous good. It's apparently attempting to blame the government, but in fact the drivers of welfare dependency and relative poverty, including food poverty, are multiple and profound. Their complexity is suggested by the fact that obesity is a greater problem than food shortage in our country, and the Baines Public Health Department has rightly addressed obesity and overweight with campaigns against refined sugar in the diet and some measures to encourage habits of sport and exercise in schools. As we know, the relative poverty drivers include difficulty of family formation, family breakdown, educational failure, debt, mental ill health, addiction, and alcoholism, not the problems with the huge welfare benefit program, which struggles to sufficiently reward work at the same time as making sure that there is a good welfare safety net. The Public Health Department of Baines, through the Food Poverty Action Plan, is to be congratulated on its contribution to mitigating some of these complex problems. And of course, the pandemic has then made things much worse and more difficult. The government, in fact, has been extraordinarily supportive of families, especially those on low incomes, with measures costing a mind-blowing £280 billion and rising. These include the massive furlough scheme, the £500 million hardship fund providing relief for vulnerable households, the £170 million COVID winter grant scheme to support vulnerable families through the winter months, a £7 billion scheme to increase welfare, the £1,000 universal credit bonus, and of course the Marcus Radford inspired free school meals voucher for the school holidays as well as the lockdown. With central and local government, and the aspiring food banks such as Anne and Hales, and the goodwill of so many ordinary people, we can expect to ensure that vulnerable children always have access to good food. So it's timely that after a gap of some time, the Food Poverty Action Plan is now being updated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. So I've got Councillor Ruth Malloy, then Matt McCabe. So Ruth, you've got the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I would just like to thank the officers, the public health officers who've been involved with this project, and in particular, Millie Carmichael, the health improvement officer, who's done so much. One thing I was going to pick out from the report is I think it's very important that the group has now joined up with Feeding Britain, because they not only provide practical support to us as a steering group, but they also do a lot of important lobbying in Parliament. And I think it is important to say that although at the moment everyone is very preoccupied with COVID and making sure that everybody has enough to eat, we have to look much longer term to think about the whole food system and the fact that systematically there's overproduction, which leads to a lot of food waste. And really what we need is for good use of resources and for everyone to have the means to be able to feed themselves well. And that brings me to really my last point, which is referred to at the very beginning of the report on page 15 about the language that is used. And although it's referred to as the Food Poverty Steering Group, there is a now consensus that that name should be changed, because it almost sounds as if we're aspiring to it. In fact, what we are aspiring to is food justice. So I think you'll find in future that it has a different name. But in any case, there's a lot of good work going on, but we do need to look longer term towards a more resilient food system, and perhaps that would include more production locally. Anyway, thank you. I'm pleased to support this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Malloy. So I've got Councillor Matt McCabe, then I'm going back to Rob for summing up. So Matt, yours.
Thank you, Chair. So in the absence of a widespread use of a living wage or a fully funded universal credit, we have to say thank you to the third sector for picking up the slack. Councillor Hale has mentioned food banks, and I'll mention the food pantries because I had the privilege of visiting Mercy in Action earlier last year, and really impressed with what they do and how they're set up. But I just wanted to focus more on food security from my own personal perspective. And members of the LDF steering group will know I've mentioned this in light of our review of the local plan, the partial review of the local plan. I'm concerned that we don't necessarily have the right policies to support local food production. Bath used to be surrounded by market gardens, and I'm not sure that our current policies would really support the re-establishment of those. And I think in the light of potential food shortages or the need to grow more food in Britain because of Brexit, that actually we need to look at how we extend the growing season to support community growers and businesses that want to start up around Bath. I think it's important we do grow our food locally so that we can provide well-produced fresh food very close to where it's going to be consumed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCabe. So, Councillor Appleyard, I'll come back to you for summing up, but again, loads of points there. So you may want to summarise them in writing and send them direct to the councillors or in general to the councillors. But I'll leave it for you to sum up in a timely manner, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I mean, I will pick up any further points to individual councillors, but to be honest, I think everybody actually is understanding the objective of the plan in front of us. First of all, I'd like to obviously say thank you to Liz for seconding this, and obviously recognise the work that Kevin did in terms of the school meals. Just really wanted to just mention to Alan and reassure Alan, the value of the food banks is immense to our community. I think the emergence of food pantry is just an attempt to find another way of obviously trying to deal with the challenges in front of us. And there is so much room for food pantries and food banks to work together in support. And I know by speaking to officers that they value the work of the food banks without a doubt. And there's no doubt that the community value them because they support the food banks quite considerably well on there. YK, Alison was next. I think you're right to touch on inequalities. I think we do have to look at those determinants of inequalities. And I know it's something the Health and Wellbeing Board is, and this food strategy will cover many, many elements of the council. YK, I mean, my friend YK, I mean, yeah, I don't think anybody would fail to be moved by your passion and over how you feel about that. And I think it doesn't hurt to have that type of emotion when we're talking about these subjects. So thank you for that. Michael, I don't really know where to start with that one. You're right, there is a lot of money of support, but what I will say is that prior pandemic, we still had those sort of resources at our fingertips, and we've never utilised them to support the welfare packages as well as we could do. So you've actually highlighted the fact there. And I would just like finally just mention the comment that Ruth said about the Feeding Britain initiative. There actually has been a national recognition from the team of Feeding Britain down to the team in Baines for the work they've been doing and recognising the amount of support they're actually putting out there and pulling together the community. And that's what it's all about. It's a community effort, and we as councillors are part of that. So thank you very much for that. Support it.
Thank you, Councillor Appleyard. So moving to the vote then, we've got recommendation 2.1 on the table. It's been moved and seconded. We had clarification over section 3.3, remember, which everyone came away happy with. So look, hearing the debate, I think there's a majority for. So can I ask those against to make their views known in the chat, please? There's nothing coming through, Joe. So those abstentions, please. No abstentions being typed. So can we take that as unanimous? If someone doesn't agree with a unanimous position, then make it clear now. Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. So moving on to the next paper, we've got paper 8, which is Standards Committee Annual Report. Councillor Hansel to table, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Standards Committee fulfils an important role for Bath and North East Somerset Council and the 45 parish and town councils and over 500 councillors in our area. Standards and the Code of Conduct are about ethical behaviour and following rules of conduct that are clearly set out. We all subscribe to the Nolan principles for those in public life: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. The Baines Standards Committee Annual Report 2019-2020 lists complaints under the Code of Conduct. This covers Baines and town and parish councillors. There were 0 complaints for failing to declare an interest, 0 complaints relating to bullying or lack of respect, 0 complaints relating to disclosure of confidential information, and just 7 complaints of bringing a council into disrepute. All the 7 complaints related to town parish councillors. 5 of these complaints were made by members of the public and 2 by town parish councillors. In 5 of the 7 cases, no further action was required. 1 case was withdrawn and 1 case was resolved informally. This is an impressive record, and it reflects well on councillors, council chairs and council clerks in our area. I and the other committee members would like to thank Maria Lucas once again for her work while Baines monitoring officer and wish her well in her retirement. we would like to thank our independent chair, Dr. Axel Palmer, and all the team that serves the Standards Committee for their work preparing this annual report and its statistics. Sadly, the committee has lost a long-standing and valued member following the death of Keynsham Town Councillor Tony Crouch in December. I move the recommendation as printed that Council notes the work of the Standards Committee as set out in the annual report, Appendix 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's moved, I believe, Sally Davis to speak and second.
Yes, thank you, Chair. To reiterate the thanks that Councillor Hounslow has given to the Chair and the officers who support us and all the other representatives, and to again particularly thank Maria Lucas, who I've been on Standards for probably more time than most of the others on there now, and when the training she's brought in for us, she brought forward, and some of the present members have taken, it's been really helpful. So particular thank you to Maria, and I'm sure we shall miss her. However, I really look forward to working with Michael in the future, and as I say, thank you to all officers and other people on the committee. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Sally, thank you. I've got Eleanor Jackson, and that's the last of the speakers. So Eleanor.
Yesterday, President Biden said, "We will not lead by the example of power, but by the power of our example." And to a large extent, that applies to us as well. Councillors do have power. They can make decisions about planning policy and planning applications which will change society and the environment around us for good. But it is about more than leadership, or even the other 6 principles from which the Code of Conduct derives. We have been considering what we owe to officers in this current COVID-19 emergency. And what is striking is not so much their leadership as the dedicated service that they have given, above and beyond the call of duty or the demands of their profession. And as a Christian, it is Christ the servant that I try to emulate. This report represents work done by our officers in particularly difficult circumstances, but we are most indebted to the volunteer members of the Standards Committee. Councillors come and go, but the volunteers carry on year after year, demonstrating the selflessness, another principle of the Code of Conduct. Councillors, however, are fallible human beings. Simul justus, simul peccator, as Martin Luther would say. That is, justified by their aspirations, but at the same time, sinners. We get carried away by our enthusiasms, we say things without thinking, we forget to declare an interest, and above all, we forget the OAP on the 82A bus to Tyning Radstock, who doesn't see the world as we do. She would say, right is right and wrong is wrong. And you watch them, councillors. You never know what they'll get up to next. The public sense of fair play that we their representatives, play by the rules is vital. What this report shows is a fall in the number of complaints year on year since 2015, which I hope is an indication of improving standards in local government, not apathy among residents or fatigue among councillors. However, there is a fatal flaw in the whole intellectual structure of the government-ordained system that we are debating, apart from the omission of any measures to address the special problems generated by social media. The importance of respect for others, whatever their background, heritage, behaviour, and self-respect, which makes everything else possible, is not acknowledged. Respect, self-respect reveals our common humanity and enables us to work together with the positive results that Baines residents expect of us. We set an example on the long road to fairer, juster and more sustainable, supportive society for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So I'm going to pass back to Councillor Hounslow to sum up, but overall, the improving standards is a good reflection on us as Baines councillors. So I think we've got to hold our heads high there. So over to you, Councillor Hounslow.
Thank you, Chair. I've got nothing to add. I'm very impressed by the speeches by Councillor Davis and Councillor Jackson, and certainly yesterday's sort of inauguration in the United States contained some very lofty aspirations and sentiments that I think we can share. So yes, the number of complaints has reduced over the recent years, and hope that's not a statistical quirk, but just a reflection of the increasing competence and integrity of councillors and the professionalism of council clerks across our area. So I hope everyone will support the work of the Standards Committee and adopt this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hansel. So the nature of the report, I'm going to take any abstentions or against all the time. If you can make your views clear. Nothing's coming through. No, so again, unless someone shouts, I'm going to take that as a unanimous position on the council in support of this report. So that's unanimous, Joe. Thank you. Okay, so paper 9 is statements and questions from councillors. I've got a statement from Councillor Jackson. So Eleanor, are you okay?
So thank you very much, Chair, for letting me speak, and perhaps, given the lateness of the hour, having the last word. I always like that. I'm sure that we all applaud and support the statement by the leader of the councillor on behalf of the group leaders, and therefore on our behalf too. However, I think there is merit also in having a statement from a humble backbencher. In my case, someone who has very much benefited from the efforts of the officers to keep the council running and provide the support that I need, especially in the IT department. But I think probably we could all think of some different aspect of the council's life which has been of help and support to us. We've all probably received extra help above and beyond. In Catholic theology, this is called a work of supererogation, going above and beyond what you might expect from anyone. In 2017, Westfield Parish Council and Radstock Museum put on an exhibition about the history of Westfield with the theme, Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. I suspect our officers who have done extraordinary things would say that they were just doing their job, but I think we ought to recognise their valour. In fact, in the statement from the leader of the council, she described very movingly all the difficulties that they have overcome. As the outgoing chair of council, I started thinking about awards, like the chair's awards for community service. And I asked the CEO, Mr. Godfrey, to think about this. Could we have awards for our officers? It is a problem, I think, that our residents get recognition through the community awards scheme, and councillors can be nominated for birthday honours and so on. But officers are invisible and are perhaps not sufficiently appreciated. Then I remembered the medal which my father received in 1945. You quite often see it on veterans' blazers. It's the green and orange striped one. And he was given it not for valour on the North Sea convoys, nor for any personal act of heroism, because it is the Spam Medal. It was given to all veterans of World War II. And I would like the administration in this council to consider a certificate, or perhaps even better, a COVID bonus, a book token or something for our officers who've come through this extraordinary situation with so much courage and courtesy, and perhaps be given a positive commendation to put in their CVs, although I hope that they will stay with us for a long time yet. So thank you very much, one and all officers, for all the work that you've done for us, and also to those who, showing symptoms of COVID or having to self-isolate, kept at home. That was also a sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackson. So in the nature of other statements and questions, I'll go to group leaders. So any factual questions from Councillor Romero, please?
No questions, but thank you very much, Eleanor, for your comments. And, you know, absolutely, you know, I think we should consider what we can do to recognise all of our officers that who, as I said before, have gone above and beyond the sort of the call of their normal line of work.
Thank you. Councillor Myers?
No comments. I don't want to be repeating what's already been said.
Appreciated. Thank you, Councillor Myers. Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Eleanor, and I completely agree with Gina that, you know, maybe we should look at some sort of recognition that is not too much of cost to the council. But I'd like to thank all the staff again for everything they've done in this pandemic.
Thank you very much, Councillor Walker. And Robin, Councillor Moss?
Thanks for the statement, Eleanor. I've got no questions.
That's very much appreciated. So that is the end of the formal agenda tonight. Before I close, on that point there, you picked up the fact that there may be some recognition. So I'm assuming that you will pick that up through the Cabinet and as leader of the council about some action in the future.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, great, Dina, thank you. So yes, as I say, that brings the end of the formal agenda. Before I close the meeting, I'd just like to thank Lisa for timekeeping this evening. I'm much appreciated and well done. Keep everyone and me in order. And Joe and Mike and the other officers for all their support in getting through tonight. And obviously all you councillors, all the patience that you've given to get through the